Okie dokie. Without further ado, hello everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today. We are thrilled to be here first and foremost, celebrating Black History Month. And on a personal level, I'm just thrilled, as I'm sure many of you are, to hear from these three alumni that have truly contributed to the history of IES, to what it means to be IES abroad student, and most importantly, to what it means to make Black history abroad. So, without further ado, I will go ahead and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So, I'm going to go ahead and ask them to please provide their name, their IES abroad program and year that they went abroad, and what you're doing now, and their current profession. So, I'll go ahead and let you all get started.
Thank you. I'm John Hodges. I was in Nantes, France in 1966 and 67. I'm a retired professor of religious studies from the University of Tennessee. I'm now retired, but I'm writing about my life. So it's a wonderful thing that you're having this program today because I want to hear about the experiences of people who have gone after me. So I'm happy to participate.
Thank you so much, John.
I'm Robert Ross. John and I were at Nantes at the same time.
Oh, hi, Robert. Hi.
Hey, how are you,
To see
John?
you.
Yeah, John and I were from Morehouse and went to Nantes at the same time, 1966 through 67. It was a wonderful experience for both of us, I think. It was an eye-opening experience having grown up in rural South Georgia for me and John in the Mississippi Delta. So this was a real opening experience for both of us. Presently, I'm a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst in Santa Monica, California. Used to teach at UCLA and SC, but had to give it up, let some young blood come in, just like you young people are. So it's good to see you, and I like to hear about your experiences. I'm sure they've been very different than John's and mine's.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yasmin, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Yasmin. I studied with IES Abroad from 2018 to 2019. In the fall of 2018, I studied with IES Rabat. And in the spring of 2019, I studied in Rome. Right now, I work for an organization called Give Directly. And the whole mission of our organization is to give unconditional cash transfers to people in poverty. And I work on the data tech team.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. And Devin?
Yeah, how y'all doing? My name is Devin Walker. As an undergrad, I studied abroad a few times in Canada, London, and South Africa. And most recently, I was the professor of an IES course in China, in Beijing, China. And my current role, I work at the University of Texas at Austin, where I direct the Office of Global Leadership and Social Impact. And yeah, even just hearing the first three people before me, I'm really excited to listen and learn. I'm really excited about this intergenerational panel.
So thank you so very much for you three. And now before getting started, I want to go ahead and just provide a little bit of information on the format. So we're going to go ahead and for the next 25 minutes, we're going to have some general questions for our three panelists. So please jump in whenever you feel you want to share something about the specific question. And then in the last 25, we'll have individual questions that I've drafted for John, Yasmin, and Devin here. I will ask all attendees if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and write it in the chat, and then we have some time towards the end. We'll go ahead and ask those to our panelists, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We only have an hour today, and I know our panelists are very excited to share their experiences with us. So to get started, as a reminder, we're throughout this month we're celebrating Black History Month, and what I wanted to ask you three is, what does it mean to you? What does Black History Month mean to you? And taking into account the intergenerational perspectives of our panelists, how did you grow up hearing and celebrating Black History Month? Has it changed over time? And as I mentioned, what does Black History Month mean to you, perhaps even in the context of study abroad?
Okay, I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s. The celebration of Black History Month was in 1926 when it was introduced by Carter Wilson. It was Black History, Negro History Week, and it was the 2nd of February. It's always been in February because February coincides with the birth dates of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Lincoln on the 12th and Douglass on the 14th. At this time, it was, as I say, a week, and we talked about, Black first. While we still do that today, we also talk about Black issues today, such as systemic racism, all that kind of thing. Now, what does Black history mean to me? It is a celebration of the story of how we have made it thus far, the stony road we have trod. It is also a hope for the future. And I'm reminded of Sam Cooke's song, Change is going to come. And so we believe that, and that is what it means to me, where we have been and where we must go in the future. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so Black History Month to me, when I was growing up, I remember learning a lot about Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, the greats, Madam C.J. Walker. And in school, I remember us talking about those same people over and over again. And I remember sometimes it being a very watered down version of what their ideologies are. And as I have grown up and gone to college and read more books about them, I realize for me, Black History Month has been a celebration of the complexities of Black people, which has been absolutely wonderful. And definitely celebrating queer people, celebrating people who have disabilities, definitely opening up of who we can celebrate. And in the context of study abroad, I've realized how important it is to celebrate Black history internationally. And for me, what that means is to read Black books, watch Black media, and just open up and expose myself to different types of Black experiences around the world.
Yeah, thank you. Similarly, I think for me, it's first and foremost an acknowledgement of the history that often gets marginalized within our day-to-day dominant narratives of whose stories we present, whose stories we focus on. So I think it's a time for us as Black people, but then also as the country to really sit and acknowledge the histories, the challenges, the triumphs, and really most importantly for me, I think the gains that we've made over the course of this history and the way that we consistently, force this country to really grapple with what it means to be a democratic nation. And I think we saw that so clearly over this last election. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And I think when it relates to internationalism, I think for me, Black history is about taking advantage of the opportunities that my ancestors fought for and died for and struggled for and were abused for and kept going, kept pushing. It was really exciting to hear the first gentleman talk about going abroad in the 60s. And I can't think about what that must have meant coming from rural Georgia to go internationally at that particular time. And the fact that now we all have access to passports, we can all travel internationally. I think that's something that I feel like is really important for us to take advantage of the resources that are available to us now that weren't always available to even our parents.
Thank you, Devin. And one question in and already getting goosebumps because again, this is such powerful stories that our three panelists are sharing right off the bat. As a similar in that similar vein, you know, in terms of talking about Black History Month, and now being focused on this whole concept of study abroad, and you know, despite strides made in recent years to diversify the ranks of college students who chose to study abroad, work remains in our field in order to really expand the number of traditionally underrepresented students partaking in international academic experiences. So I want to ask you, you three, who or what influenced you to study abroad? And as we know, you know, especially for underrepresented students, the family oftentimes plays a critical role. So did your family play a role in that decision-making process to study abroad?
The person who helped me most, I think, was E.A. Jones. Uh, he was a chairman, I think, of the Merrill Committee when I was selected. By the way, he was a professor of French, and he was my homeboy. He lived in Mississippi, so it was his influence that really got me going. Of course, I had to have my approval of my mother and father, but I worked out that if they told me what to be careful about, I was all ready to go.
For me, my family actually didn't want me to study abroad. I think they were afraid because I am perceived as a Black woman, and thus that makes me a target for a whole list of things. I think they were really nervous. I also have a lot of food allergies, so they were definitely nervous about how I was going to eat. But I was definitely self motivated to go abroad. And I also think one of the biggest factors in allowing me to go abroad was the financial commitment, because it is a huge financial commitment to be able to study abroad. And luckily, I had the PASI scholarship, which allowed me to study abroad. And also, IES gave me a scholarship, and that was really helpful to be able to go study abroad, but also feel comfortable about not having like huge loads of debt afterwards. So the financial support that I got definitely helped me.
Fantastic.
Yo, I'm also a Posse scholar. Shout out to Posse. What's up? They paid for my international education as well. Obviously, that was a huge component of it. But I would say for me, it started way back when I was in the 6th grade, you know, taking world history. And I was so excited to learn something about Africa because I had been learning about Europe my whole life. And me, myself, I'm mixed. My father is Black, my mom's is white. So I was excited to learn about that part of my history. I had learned a lot in the house, but I was excited to finally learn something within school. And the first 11 weeks were European history. Then the next session was African history. So I was excited to do 2.5 months. And the entire session was a week. And I was furious. And in that moment, as a 6th grader, I decided for myself, I set the goal that I'm going to go to Africa one day so I can learn about this through my own lens so that, you know, it doesn't have to be marginalized in my own mind the way I'm taught about it. And then I could be an ambassador and tell people stories and share my experiences. So it was actually Mr. Hahn, my 6th grade history teacher. Thank you very much for motivating me to, you know, travel the world through your negligence.
Love the Posse connection too. I'm telling you, our alumni, this alumni network is something else. I'm also seeing some shout out from Merrill scholars here in the chat. So this is fantastic. Now we're going to talk about Black identity. I think our notion of identity, of all of our identities, and of self has different implications at home and abroad. So to ask you three, how has your own sense of self, how has your Black identity and sense of community, was it different here versus abroad? While arguably some other countries are certainly more welcoming, conversations around race and ethnicity certainly transverses borders. So Yeah, how did your identity differ at home versus abroad, if at all? Or in other words, how did your experience in a new country affect your view of your own identity? And as a follow-up, are there any similarities in the Black experience abroad to that of home?
Well, as I mentioned before, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s. I went to segregated schools. And with the exception of a few white students at Morehouse at the time, of course, I never took classes with them. My experience in 1966 in Nantes was the first time I had gone to school and studied with white students before. So it was a very difficult situation in that in that sense. We had, of course, been given this speech, about, and I'm sure that white students were given the same speech. In essence, it said to be suspicious, to be careful of others, and without the gaze of our parents, I should say the interference, we were able to work it out and work through that. But in America, I was Black first, at that time, a Negro. In Europe, I became an American Black man. You see, America was first, and to when I went to Europe. Now, I was there, and I will talk about this later, I guess. It was a turbulent time. It was in the 1960s. I went to in 1966. That whole period of the 60s was very tough. So we had to work our differences with those white students when we were looking at them and they were having in the States riots in 1967, the death of Martin Luther King in 1968. You see? So those things had an impact on how we were able to relate to each other. But we worked through that to go to plays, being in plays together, as I was, by going on group dates, by working together. So we were able to become real good friends. Okay.
Thank you, John. Yasmin or Devin, do you all have any? Yasmin?
Thank you for sharing that, John, first. For me, when I went abroad, I think the perception of my own identity just got more complicated, um, in good and bad ways. To give concrete examples about that, I had worked with Black migrants in Rabat, Morocco, and they would tell me a lot about the discrimination they had faced. And we're in Africa, right? So you're thinking everything is going to be, not great, but at least better. But they were just telling me about like all the discrimination they had received from Moroccans. And then after I went to Rome, and every day when I went to school at IES Abroad, we passed this bridge where African migrants would sell their trinkets. And a lot of times we would see them running because they were running away from officers. And so, in that sense, it made me a bit sad just to realize anywhere in the world that I have encountered so far, Blackness is attacked, Blackness is associated with violence, which just made me upset. But on the flip side of that, I think it was really nice to see the multitude of Black experience that were out there in the world. And so for me, I don't know if I could say it's positive or negative, but just I developed complicated feelings about who I am and how I relate to other Black people.
Thank you, Yasmin. You know, for me, I think it hits me a variety of different ways, and it really is dependent on where in the world that I'm at. But I would say overwhelmingly, I typically have these two experiences. One, I feel extremely liberated from the constraints and the stigmas that are associated with Blackness here in America. I'll give an example. I was teaching English in Korea. And when I first got out there, I was walking with another Black gentleman who's darker skinned Black than I am. And we were walking through an alley. It was pretty late at night. And there was a woman, a Korean woman who was going to walk by us. And in that moment, I started to do things that I had been trained to do in this country subconsciously. I started to smile. I started to move over to create more space, laugh, really make myself appear less criminalistic, right? And I think I picked up a lot of that up growing up in LA and then going to the University of Wisconsin where I was, you know, there was 2% Black people. I learned how to make others feel comfortable in my presence, right? It was a subconscious practice that I did. And when I remember when I was in Korea and this moment happened, this woman walked right by us. She didn't create any additional space. She didn't hold her purse. She looked us dead in the eyes, gave a brief little smile and kept walking. And I turned to my friend, I'm like, and as soon as I tried to articulate myself, I'm like, bro, did you? He's like, bro, I told you it's different here. He's like, they don't have a vitriol, hatred, and disgust for us here. And that moment always sat with me. And I think that's something why I always want to encourage younger people. I think our identities are always in relation to who we are and who we're not, right? And in this country, we are always defined as the antithesis to whiteness. And so I think some of those international experiences, you know, anti-Blackness is global, just as Yasmin talked about, but I do think it can be really liberating to get outside of this country and grapple with what does it mean to be a Black person internationally? And then as Dr. Hodges said, I've also had to confront my Americanness, right? And my Americanness and how that is associated to whiteness. And so how on an international platform, the same thing that might oppress me at home privileges me internationally. And I first came to realize this when I was studying abroad in South Africa. I was on this extremely long trip. I took an 18-hour bus from Cape Town to Johannesburg. Then I was going to take a 26-hour bus from Johannesburg to Lusaka, Zambia. And on that trip from Johannesburg to Lusaka, the demographics of the country are very different in the Cape Town compared to Johannesburg. It's darker skinned Black folks. And we're on the bus and I say something about being Black. And the gentleman behind me turns, he's like, you ain't Black. And I'm like, whoa, right? And so we start talking, I start telling my story. I'm like, you know, my dad, every time I left my house, he told me, you know, you Black, you don't only represent yourself, you represent this family, you represent the entire Black race. I'm telling him all this stuff and he's like, nah, man. And he pulls up my sleeve. And then he pulls up the white kid's sleeve that was next to me. And then he pulls out his sleeve, right? His forearm. He's like, look, you are white. I am Black. And although I wanted to fight it in that moment, right? And the idea of race being a social construction is really real. And I was trying to explain that, but I really had to sit with that and sit with what in my identity, my skin color, my Americanness, what did that mean in terms of its relation to privilege, resource access on a global scale? And since then, I felt like I've had to constantly take advantage, right? And not fight this privilege, but instead embrace it and see how I could use my privilege and the access to resources that I do have to make things better for other people.
Incredibly powerful. Thank you, three. So I want to talk a little bit now about life after study abroad. And as I mentioned, you know, in the second half of this webinar, I'll ask individual questions to you three related to that. But what influence, in general terms, what influence does study abroad have on your academic career and future professional goals? And how did you apply your experiences abroad after returning home?
Well, for me, studying abroad was an opportunity to learn French, another language. I needed that to pass my language exams. They required 2 languages. And so the French was easy to pass. I got the German because I found, I heard about a wonderful woman who had been in Germany in 1968. And that woman is Carolyn Richardson, who is now my wife. So that worked out very well for me, having that experience of studying abroad and meeting, learning the language and coming back because I was interested in foreign languages. I was interested in others who had gone abroad. So that worked out for me. So there are others who actually, the experience of going abroad and study changed as a result of their experience, they changed their majors. For instance, individuals who went to Vienna were many from Morehouse and Spelman were interested in going into medicine. They were pre-med majors. But some of them, when they came back, decided to go into German. That is how much the experience changed their lives and what they were about. Yes, sir.
For me, study abroad changed a lot. I've always been the type of person to make things happen for myself, no matter what the means. But I always felt that traveling abroad was something outside of my reach. But once I was able to study abroad and I was able to see, like, oh, I can do this, I created opportunities for myself to leave again. I remember for my senior year of college, I decided to go to the US-Mexico border twice, once for my thesis and then another time to lead a group of students on an alternative school break trip. And then now I realize I can look for jobs, career options that allow me to study, to not study abroad, but rather to work abroad. So having those options available to me in my job, so either work remotely or maybe have a job that allows me to travel different countries and also learn different languages. Study abroad allowed me to see that I'm capable of doing this and capable of finding resources that allow me to pursue the things that I want to pursue.
I would say for me, it just really expanded my opportunities, what I thought was possible, my goals, and also my family, right? You know, as soon as I started studying abroad, my little brother studied abroad. He went abroad to Mexico for a year. Then he went to the Peace Corps. And he also taught in Korea. My older brother, when he got to law school, he had never studied abroad, but since I had studied abroad, he decided to study abroad. My mom would come visit us, you know, my father. So I think it really influenced not only my life, but everyone around me's life. Yasmin, you know, we're in these posses, right? It's like 10 of us that go to college together, and we influence each other, right? 3 other people after I went abroad traveled abroad. So I think, you know, traveling internationally is a lot like going to college. Like once you break down that barrier and show it can be done and that it's possible, and you put a different colored face to it, then other people start to realize like, hey, I can do this too. I can do this too. And I think that it really expands our opportunities and ultimately our confidence and our ability to figure things out. If you could figure something out on the other side of the world, you're going to be a lot more confident, or I was, to come back into this country and take advantage of the resources that were available to me, to believe in myself, to apply for jobs in my city, in another state, internationally, and really just do what I wanted to do. You know, I think I told you earlier, the first real goal I set in my life was to go to South Africa when I was in the 6th grade. And once I accomplished that goal, it really made me believe in myself that I could accomplish any goal that I set my mind to. And I think that's a big benefit of going abroad, is that you really do learn to believe in yourself a lot more, because you're tested, right? You're forced to navigate uncomfortable and ambiguous situations. And through that, you start to really believe in who you are and what you have to offer.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. And so for this final piece in kind of the general section of this presentation, I want to ask and really conceptualize this question with a statement: study abroad is truly a tool for social justice. And so in your own words, what is social justice and how does it intersect or complement study abroad? Or what role does study abroad play in creating more just societies? And ultimately, what advice would you three have to share with students of color in general and Black students specifically who are interested in using study abroad as a tool for change?
Well, I think we've said something about this. It opens you up, study abroad. It makes you less provincial. You begin to see and appreciate other people. I grew up, as I said, with very narrow views. The people I had associated with looked like I did, spoke like me. So it was an opportunity to expand the world, to become, if you will, more global. And I think that helped a lot, it will help a lot individuals when they study abroad and they see others. For instance, I would hate to think that the person who, his name is Chauvin, the cop, who put his knee on Floyd, I would hate to think that he studied abroad. I, because that will say, don't treat others the way you would not like to be treated. So that's very important, I think. I think that's very crucial. And I think study abroad will certainly help in that respect.
Me, when I think about social justice, it's really hard for me to pin down one definition just because I think of so many different practices and stuff like that. But for advice for Black students going abroad, I think it's important to think of social justice in the country's terms. And to make that a little bit clearer, what I mean by that, I remember I was teaching immigrants in Rabat, and in America, the whole setup of education is just like you sit there, you listen to the teacher, and then that's it. You get a test, and if you pass the test, you're great. If you don't pass the test, like whatever. And I had to really rethink of what it meant to be a teacher teaching migrants who are probably don't really care about learning English. They really just want to like get to their destination country, whether it is Morocco or just another country in Europe. And I had to rethink, okay, what is important to them? How can I make this a little bit of a reprieve from the realities of what they were facing? And in thinking through that with my co-teachers, we made it a lot more engaging, a lot more back and forth, a lot more exchange. And that's what I mean about thinking about social justice on the country's terms, or the person you're supposed to be helping or assisting, thinking through it on their terms. And I think for me, that experience was really eye-opening because it really encouraged me to be adaptable in what I think social justice can be. So that's what I would think of that question.
Thank you. I think for me, I think when I think about any form of social justice, I think first and foremost, the person or the community or whomever wants to be justice oriented really needs to start with themselves, and they need an opportunity to reflect on who they are, how they relate to their communities, to their country, and ultimately to the world at large. And I think oftentimes, I'll say I speak for myself as a young Black man, I didn't always think about myself in global terms. And, for example, when I went to South Africa and I learned around, what the role that America had in terms of supporting their apartheid government, right? When I went to Southeast Asia And I learned, growing up, I loved history. I loved learning about history. And oftentimes, what do we teach in history classes? War, right? And, you see these folks walking around the States these days with like sweaters talking about like back-to-back World War champs, right? Like that's what we're taught to think about ourselves in relation to this country. We're the best country. Everybody wants to come here. We saved the world, right? But I think when you really start to be reflective of who you are, you have to come to terms with the role that your country has actually played internationally, right? And disrupt this dominant narrative about the great savior and really realize how we've disrupted countries, we've created coups in countries, we've supported dictatorships, we've supported racist governments like apartheid. We had a silent war in Cambodia and Laos, where we were bombing those countries every single day for 8 years. And when you start to really learn about all these things, I think that's, if we really want to be social justice advocates, we've got to look beyond our country, right? Because our country's influence is way broader. And when you think, well, at least when I think back to a lot of the civil rights leaders in the 60s, they were making these connections to internationalism and to the global plight of Black folks and challenging American foreign policy. And ultimately, I feel like that's the role that international education can play towards social justice, is all of us as Americans really coming face to face with what America represents internationally, the privileges that has provided us, and how do we use our current platforms and opportunities to create change, to make systems more equitable, to create more opportunities for people on the other side of the world, to use up less of the world's resources, all sorts of things that I think we could do that will put us on a path towards global citizenship.
Fantastic. And that wraps up the first half of this panel, which is the general questions. And if you notice, our panelists spoke to every single question I posed to them. So thank you for that. But now we get into my favorite part of it, because now I get to ask you specific questions that I've really come up with over the last couple of weeks from, besides Devin, I've had the pleasure today to meet John and Yasmin for the first time. And we're going to start with John. And I'd like to first, before I pose a question, John, I've been hearing about you, John, from my wonderful colleague Gretchen Cook Anderson, from Jodie Madler, and the wonderful things that they say about you. And now I could finally, I confirm by myself that you've had such a profound impact on this organization, not on some of my colleagues, but on this organization. And the reason that, I think more Black students will be able to study abroad, not only in our program, but study abroad as a whole, is because of really legendary individuals like you. So thank you for being such an inspiration. And so, John, as a former member of the faculty at the University of Tennessee, go Vols, can you provide some insight from the institutional perspective on how colleges and universities can elevate study abroad to the forefront of the student experience?
I think the experiences of students who have been abroad should be recognized, and they should be given credit for the experience. That's very important. I also think that we should encourage other students to go abroad. I had a chance of listening to the stories of W.E.B. Du Bois, who was in Germany in 1892 through 94, and how that experience was so important to him. I think all colleges should put Du Bois's words on their little announcement when they recruit people to go. Biography. His own life and my thought and feeling toward it. Something of the possible beauty and elegance of life permeated my soul. I had been before, above all, in a hurry. Now at times I sat still. I came to know Beethoven's symphonies and Wagner's Ring. I looked long at the colors of Rembrandt and Titian. I saw in arch and stone and steeple the history of striving of men, and also their taste and expression. Form, color, and words took new combinations and meaning. So I think that is good testimony from one, what it means to study abroad and what it has done for him. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute there. But what I was saying is that one of the reasons why I just said those words about John and his role, I think, for our organization is the monumental role, John, that you've played in the endowment of the Charles E. Merrill Junior Scholarship. And so, can you tell us about your role in spearheading the endowment of the Charles E. Merrill Junior Scholarship at IES Abroad, and how did Mr. Merrill's generosity influence your study abroad experience, which appears to have inspired your effort to build this scholarship on behalf of future students at Morehouse and Spelman colleges?
Well, I'm a poor boy from the Mississippi Delta, poorest region of the poorest state, Mississippi. I would not have been able to go to Europe without the support of Charles Merrill. And I think, as Robert says, Robert Ross, Dr. Ross said, we went together at Morehouse along with Rick Ransom. And since I have been working on the Charles Merrill Scholarship, I learned about others who have gone before me, and they are an impressive bunch. Let me give you names of two individuals. As Marion Wright Edelman, who went to Spelman and in the early days. You would know her as the president emerita of the Children's Defense Fund. She went to the Sorbonne and to Geneva, and later on another scholarship, went to Russia. And there is, from Morehouse College, Donald Hopkins. He is known chiefly for what he has done to help eradicate the guinea worm disease. These are just two individuals from an impressive list of people who are Merrill Scholars. So I want to make that scholarship available to others as well. I believe that one's resources should not stand in the way. I did not have enough money. I believe that the fellowship at the time of scholarship was $3,000. You can't get much done for $3,000 nowadays, but it meant a world to me. So I want to make sure that others have the opportunity that I had. And I know that here I see Gretchen Cook. I know she was one time a pen pal of Charles Merrill. I want to join Gretchen in her I consider her sacred mission. Here's what she says, and let me read it. I am an evangelist for study and travel abroad. Some use knowledge to cure illness. Some use law to right wrongs and advocate for those without a voice. I use my knowledge of travel, culture, and places to cultivate global citizens who reflect the world's diversity. Yasmin, you are a global citizen. So that's what it has meant to me and why I want to help grow. And I see that I have on the program, on this panel, who are looking in, individuals who have made contributions to the Merrill Endowment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to grow that fund so that individuals from Morehouse and Spelman can study and travel abroad as I did.
Dr. Hodges, thank you so very much. And I will have to add too that I think one of the coolest part of this, I mean, there's been so many fantastic moments, but you know, one of your classmates when you were in Dr. Ross, and to be able to stay in touch with some of your classmates, to be able to continue supporting, you know, HBCUs. Also, shout out to HBCUs, to Morena, to Tania at Howard, to Spelman, to Morehouse, to all those institutions making it possible for more Black students to go abroad. Shout out to all of you, and ultimately thank you so much, John, for the support, for our organization, for the scholarship, and really for the future of more Black students going abroad. So Yasmin, what I want to ask you is, you know, as an immigrant myself, I was so touched by, you know, really the work that you've done abroad and that you continue to do in this country for migrant communities. So from Black Lives Matter to immigrant rights movements, causes that we are fighting for at home are also relevant abroad. Can you discuss your volunteer work with immigrant and refugee communities in Rabat, as well as any similarities or differences about the rhetoric or messaging in country at immigrants and immigration at home versus abroad?
Yeah. I mentioned it a little bit before, but basically my job was to teach English to migrants in Rabat. And I notice in both Rabat and in Rome and in America that there's this really similar rhetoric that immigrants are stealing our jobs, they're diluting our culture. It's very interesting how similar the rhetoric was, but just in different languages. And the thing I also noticed, Devin also touched on this earlier, was colorism when we think about immigrants. So I had done research at the US-Mexico border, and when you think about the US-Mexico border, you think about Latinx people coming across the border. And it's interesting because when I was doing my research, I realized a lot of light-skinned Latinx people were shown both demonizing them and from the humanitarian sense. Like a lot of organizations that were helping immigrants would show light-skinned Latinx immigrants and saying like, okay, we should help them. But at the US-Mexico border, it's a very high percentage of dark-skinned Haitians are actually imprisoned at the border. And when I was in Morocco and when I was in Rome, I noticed that a lot of dark-skinned African migrants were shown coming on the boats and showing being demonized and stuff like that. So I found more similarities than differences across the world, in America, in Morocco, and in Italy.
Thank you, Jasmine. And let's see here. So a shout out to you and a congratulations again is, you know, for those of you that aren't aware, Yasmin is our 2019 IES Abroad Global Citizen of the Year. And so what did it mean to be recognized as a 2019 IES Abroad Global Citizen of the Year? And what advice might you have for students looking to participate and reimagine service learning, volunteer, or research opportunities abroad after, especially after the pandemic?
To be recognized as the Global Citizen of the Year was insane, to say the least. Like, I still don't have the words to be given that kind of title. And I'm definitely so grateful for all the opportunities you all have given me while being in this position. So people actually mention it to me when I apply for different things. Like, for example, I'm like a Fulbright semi-finalist, and that's something that like what they would mention in the interview would be like, oh, so you did this, and then it would come up all the things I did with IES Abroad. So I am very honored. But for students, for Black students planning on studying abroad or doing research, um, the work in study abroad definitely starts before you go. And I've been taking this, so I'm planning on going to Spain. So I've been taking this opportunity to learn Spanish. I've been taking the opportunity to learn Spanish music. I've been taking the opportunity to just really get into the culture, to have a better perception of what is going on exactly when I go to the country, and also to be prepared of all the different things I can experience. So it's not just learning Spanish, but also reading Spanish literature in Spanish. So the work for study abroad definitely starts before you go, because it's really important to be cognizant of the situation you're going into, and especially as an American, and there will be a tendency for people to serve you. Like, for me, if I didn't speak, people would really ignore me. But once I spoke a little bit of English and you heard my American accent come out, everyone was like, oh, you're American. All right, here we go. Let's talk to you. Let's be friendly to you. Let's be nice to you. So the work of definitely thinking through your place in the country that you want to go to starts way before you even step off the airplane. It's important to read, to know at least a little bit of the language. At least greetings is the bare minimum that you should be doing. Just to be prepared of what you're getting yourself into, and to have some type of plan, some type of idea of what's going on in your host country.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Yasmin. And thank you for being such a wonderful ambassador of what it means to be an IES Abroad alumni. And now Devin, and before I get to the questions, I just got to tell you all, Devin for me, and I actually never told them this, Devin for me is a personal role model. Devin is a rock star at UT Austin. You know, every time I'm at a UT Austin fair, that honestly is the first person I go try to find. You know, so my brother, thank you for being such an incredible role model for me, man. And I truly, I mean that from the bottom of my heart, man. You played such an amazing role in my career and looking up to you, and I know for so many students at UT Austin as well. And I think our attendees will be able to see that through these questions. And so, in a recent article in Diverse Issues in Higher Education, which I will share with everyone here, you discuss the importance of heritage exploration or heritage seeking trips. Can you elaborate on what heritage exploration is and how program location can influence the way students think about their own identity?
Yeah, certainly. Well, first off, thank you for the compliments, my man. You know, it's always great to see you. Appreciate that. You know, second, you know, I wrote that article. I don't know if y'all saw this video. I talked about it a little bit in the article. There was this little kid shooting hoops in his driveway, and the cop car was down the street, and he hid behind his car. And it reminded me so much of my childhood. And in relation to this conversation, I think what that moment did for me is it really represented the intergenerational trauma that we carry as Black folks, what Professor Joy DeGruy has called post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I was thinking, what are the ways in which we could disrupt that, right? What can this kid experience on this earth that could disrupt that idea that he needs to hide from the cops? And from there, I kind of got into, you know, the article. And yeah, I was ultimately talking about the need for us, when we look at students of color, specifically Black students, we know the research suggests they want to go to Black countries or countries with Black people in them. However, when you look at study abroad departments, right, oftentimes the majority of their programs are to Europe. And then we have this struggle around, well, why can't we recruit these students? Well, because you're not centering them in your program. It's almost as simple as that, right? So what we need to do is we need to bring students into the conversation early rather than on the back end, and engage them around what are the conversations that you want to be having when you're abroad? What are the locations that you want to go to? What do you want your study abroad cohort group to look like? Right? What are the type of site visits that you would like to engage in when you are abroad? And I think when we start to have those conversations early and truly center these students from program inception, we're able to develop programming that speaks to their needs, and then you'll get them, right? I think in 2018, we took 81 students to Cape Town, South Africa, 55 of which were Black, another 17 of which were Latino. And what we've been able to do here, is really center the student experience. And I think it starts with, where do they want to go? I told you all for myself, since I was in sixth grade, I had always wanted to go to Africa. And I think many of our students are similar. Not all. I don't want to paint a brush and saying all Black students want to go to Africa, right? It's not that. I just think it's about diversifying the options that these students have, and then letting them know early and often. If we know that their grandparents or their parents were less likely to have access to international education, and then we get on campus and we don't do any specific outreach to these groups, we also have to understand that the same patterns are going to happen. So I think we need to get to students early and often, recruit them with the idea of, hey, you can study abroad here, and you can study abroad where you're not the only one on your program. You can go abroad with 15 other Black students. You can go abroad to South Africa with 6 other kids from South Dallas, right? And I think that is what's helped move the needle for us.
Fantastic. And I was actually, you answered a question that was in the chat without even posing it to you. But the question actually was, because you touched upon a lot of this, was earlier you also touched upon, studying U.S. world history as primacy. But the question was, what do you suggest to faculty and professionals in the field of study abroad on how we can amplify Black, non-European, African history in our programming and in our curriculum? So I heard from Devin, whether it's geographic location or really diversifying that curriculum. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Devin. And to wrap it up, and one thing I'll also mention, if whether Dr. Moore at UT Austin or Dr. Charles Liu, who's now at the University of San Diego, who you've worked very closely with, Devin, and I think your professional relationship with them is what prompted this next question, which is, and really now that you're leading your own programs, right? You went from, I think that has to be the most popular program at UT Austin, Dr. Moore's program. And I always hear there's a wait list. And now that you're leading your very own programs, and so I wanted to mention the contemporary increase in faculty-led programs, especially as a way to make study abroad accessible for underrepresented students, is an important trend in our field. Having played a major role in leading programs at UT Austin, can you provide some insights into your experience garnering support from faculty members and other campus stakeholders in leading trips abroad? And why do you think faculty-led programs abroad have become an option for students like us, underrepresented students, to see the globe?
Yeah, I think again, it's important that we provide just an array of options. I don't think anything can replace an exchange program where you go to another country, by yourself, you're taking classes with students, local students from local professors. The whole knowledge system is different, and that can't be replaced. However, I believe this is a broad stroke, stereotype, whatever. I believe people of color, specifically Black people, are relationship-based people, right? If they know you and they trust you, they're going to be more likely to believe what you have to say. So I think faculty-led trips are really popular among Black and other students of color is because they're relationship-based. Do you have a dynamic faculty member that inspires young people, that these young people trust, that they could see themselves going abroad and spending a month with? Can you help make sense of this program for this young person? I think a lot of our students are still very first-generation college students. So many times parents and grandparents, every year I'm on the phone with parents and grandparents trying to help them make sense of, this is how this will impact your student personally, right? Their personal development, but this is also how it's going to impact them professionally, right? Because I think many first-gen college students, they're thinking college is to get myself access to gainful employment, right? And so we also have to draw those connections for students. And ultimately it's about meeting students where they're at. If this is what they're most comfortable with right now, then provide these types of opportunities. What we've also seen at UT is because we have been able to get so many Black students abroad, and because we talk about it so much, I have a role with admissions where I'm always out doing admissions work, talking about it, is that now there's a word of mouth amongst the students. So they know about our program, but now what you've seen an uptick in Black in other programs as well, whether that be exchange, whether that be other faculty-led, whether it be other short-term, 1-week projects, because now there's a word of mouth amongst campus that, hey, study abroad is for us. Study abroad is okay. We can do it too. And I think it takes a while to build up that culture, but I think the easiest and fastest way to do that currently, at least has been the example at UT Austin, is by having an extremely dynamic faculty member that young people trust. And faculty-led programs are a little safer, right? They know when they're abroad, they can, at the end of the day, turn to this professor they trust.
Well, thank you so very much, Devin. And that wraps up our panel. Before we get going, I just want to thank everyone for attending. At one point, we had 160 participants. That's definitely a record for me, but that's not because I was hosting it. That's because of Devin. That's because of John. That's because of Yasmin. That's the reason so many people were here. This is why I do what I do, to be able to work with students. My passion for academia is because of individuals like you all. So Dr. Hodges, Dr. Walker, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get Dr. Baptiste at some point. Thank you all so very much. You make me proud to work for IES Abroad, and it's important, it's more important than ever to double down on everything we're doing so more Black students, so more students of color are going abroad. So thank you three very much, and thank you to everyone that attended. We hope you enjoyed this panel, and we hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.